Hey, it's Gerald from Lakers Fast Break. Anchor is the easiest way to make your next podcast. It's absolutely free, and their creation tools will allow you to record and edit your show right from your phone or your home computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on great podcast outlets like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started on your next podcast. And we're back for another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It's Gerald coming right back at you here from Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows. And if you can, please give us that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps our show and also brings us out more fans, more listeners, more NBA aficionados, whatever it is, as far as whoever is out there that wants to hear more great NBA podcasts. You know what? They get a better idea of what it's all about by listening to us right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. And if you do that or subscribe, follow, like, whatever you can do to support the show, it is truly appreciated. I've got a great show lined up for today because we're in a bubble. The Lakers are there right now in Orlando, and we're going to have our own bubble right here on the show today to just like simulate what they're doing right now in the Orlando area, right now at Disney's Wide World of Sports, and just everybody's down there, the NBA. The Lakers are practicing as we speak. They just started the other day. And I'll tell you what, we're all excited because the scrimmages are coming around the corner in less than 10 days when you hear this. So I'll tell you what, it's going to be a great time we're going to have today. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. But I have not one, but two great guests here with me today. They are from the awesome site, if you're a Lakers fan, that you got to go and give a try today. Please, if you can, be part of the conversation today at Lakerholics.net. Go ahead right now. You'll see all the great columns. You'll see the great stuff from us we do here at Lakers Fast Break, and so much more right there at the Lakerholics.net page. And the guy who runs it, my regular guest each week here, I know him as Tom Wong, but you know him as LakerTom. LakerTom, great to have you on the program today.
Great to be here, Gerald.
And on top of that, I've got another mainstay of Lakerholics.net. It's Jamie Sweet. And Jamie, I cannot thank you enough for being part of the program as well. And welcome to the Lakers Fast Break.
Thanks, Gerald. Great to be here.
So excited. Lakers basketball is right around the corner. As I was saying, I was on the Couch Coach Live show recently, and I was just saying it's almost there. You can almost reach out and grab it. You can touch it. You can almost feel it. The season's here. And I'm just so looking forward to it. The Lakers are gearing up right now. I'm hoping everything's still okay. I know that there were some glitches in some testing with Dwight Howard and Danny Green, which got me a little nervous. But I've not heard or seen anything yet on Twitter, so I'm thankful of that. But it is looking like that the Lakers are going to go ahead and gear up for battle coming up very soon. I'm very excited. Jamie, I want to hear your thoughts first on your excitement now that the Lakers and the NBA is right around the corner.
It is right around the corner. I mean, it's like you said. It's just out of reach. It's like that Buzzcock song. Feels so real. I can see it. It seems so real. I can taste it. But why can't I touch it? It's like right there, right there. I'm hopeful that there's nothing that's gonna derail it at this point. And I think that one of the exciting things. It's been a roller coaster of life for everyone, I think. And one of the exciting things about this is that even though it won't be the normal NBA. The idea of watching basketball is a very kind of normal thing, right? But now there's this big excitement about it, more so than even like a preseason or almost a playoffs, because this is something that really hasn't ever been done ever.
No, anyway. There's nothing like it. Nothing has ever been close to this.
Nah. So there's that also sort of level of spectacle, I guess, that goes along with it. I find that almost as interesting as the games themselves. Like, what will the society be like in there? There's this ESPN article that came out today about the 6 barbers who are going into the bubble, who are going to be like the professional stylists of each NBA player. And I'm just curious to see, like, you just know that there's going to be like some 30 for 30s down the line, some other probably docuseries, right? Of course, books, personal docuseries, what have you. However, this like filters out into society from this moment on. But it's the first professional sport coming back, which is exciting. Compared to baseball, which seemed like they couldn't wait to hack each other apart over an agreement that they made in March, and everybody should just sucked it up and been like, you know what, bad deal, but let's just move forward. But again, owners have a funny way of counting pennies when it comes down to it. And then the players were also stubborn in their own way. But like, I feel like the NBA did a great job of coming together, pushing the season forward, finding a bridge between differences and closing the gap. And they're going to do it. I think it'll take extreme circumstances to do real at this point.
No wonder this man is part of the conglomerate known as Lakerholics.net. No wonder he's a major voice behind it. LakerTom, you've done it again.
Thanks.
Hey, Jamie is the blog editor for Lakerholics, and he's the guy who's out there driving conversations. You can't slide anything by without him making a comment. He's just one of the mainstays that keeps the conversation going. And I agree 100% with everything that Jamie said here, because I am so tired of YouTubing old games and just the same old article. And now guys are even repeating the same trades with slight variations, and a week hasn't even gone by since I last posted the first version of the same trade. So all of a sudden now we're gonna get some new stuff to go, some real things to talk about without having to imagine and create all of this stuff. I'm a big fan of the bubble, and I think actually that we may see a lot more of the bubble going forward in all sports. It's something that at first I thought it was a joke that you would be considering it.
Well, I don't know when it comes to. Hold on, LakerTom. I don't know. When you see the price tag for this.
When you see the profits that come in from the revenues, that's the flip side of it. $150 million for the Orlando bubble is cheap when you compare. The NBA says that 40% of their total revenue of like $8.4 billion comes from games. And that you got to figure that there's another 40% that probably comes from the TV contracts.
And you were right. I got to give you this. You were right. Some of the teams actually did ship in their courts for the practice court. I just really that just blows my mind. I said it on the show with you that they would be crazy to do that, and some teams did. And it's
the luck of the floor, man. It's the home floor. It's literally the home floor. It's like the old Boston Garden parquet, but hopefully better.
But they switch that stuff out between the hockey floors and I mean, totally. The changes, they got that the whole system, man. That's like a construction project that's been repeated over and over.
And I understand it helps. I was just going to say, I understand it helps the companies involved that are transporting it, and it's great that they get that revenue. But are you sure that's money well spent? Are you sure that's money well spent? Donate it to great causes. It's jobs for those individuals. You're right. But come on, is that money truly well spent? Yeah.
It is a frivolous cost. I will admit to that. But, I mean, we're also talking about a sport that's imported, for better or worse, 6 professional stylists. There's if we're going to get into frivolous costs, we can, really get down into it. But I think in the term of I think it not only does it provide jobs, but, for the players who are playing under unprecedented, again, circumstances, it's a slight hint of familiarity. And for the teams that can afford to do it, that's why you're a big market team, right? Like, that's why you chip into the luxury tax every year and bail out the Charlottes and the Memphises and that's why you go, hey, you don't want to do it? We're going to do it. Like, you deal with it, man. Like, you can have the NBA bubble court standard logo, whatever that's going to be, we're going to have our Laker home court or whoever. I don't know who did it. That would be an interesting list to see if we have that.
The familiarity thing, I think, is an important part of it. It's just, first off, this is a game that's going to be watched by millions of people. I mean, I've had this argument with Gerald a couple of weeks ago that I think that the Lakers and Clippers game is going to have the biggest TV rating of any regular season NBA game, just because of that matchup and the fact that we're all so desperate to watch NBA basketball. I even offered to eat the podcast if that game wasn't the highest rated thing, so he's holding me to that.
I am.
But the other thing about the bubble, I think that everybody has to remember, is it starts off as a 22 team bubble. 2 weeks later, it's down to 16. 2 more weeks, it's down to 8. 2 more weeks, it's down to 4, then to 2. So if you get past that first month and we get it down to 8, chances are we're going to be home free, because those 8 teams are going to be really disciplined. It's the guys on the 16 to 22 teams that I'm worried about the first 2 weeks of breaking protocol and breaking the bubble. You listen to the death count and the number of infected COVID-19 patients in Florida. It's scary.
In Florida specifically.
They just broke a record today, and they break a record every day. So we just hope that we can get through this thing. And the great part about it, I think, is that, and I've read several articles about this, that everybody in the public health sector is really watching what's happening here, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned about how to put crowds together, how to run a bubble, and how to protect it. And the way that things are looking with this virus, we may be in this bubble conscious society for a lot longer than we really expect.
The potential's there, but I also would say that on top of all of that you have an opportunity to redefine what a sport broadcast is. I think that in a lot of ways, all of the things that you used to do in game, like you won't have a sideline. I can't imagine you'll have a sideline reporter, for instance, right? Like, who is he going to talk to, or what? What's he going? It's going to be kind of a weird environment, right? You're not going to want to have people down on the court. You're not going to have. So there's going to be these new segments that come out of it. But on top of that, I think you're going to start to see a desire for there to be an alternative broadcast that is maybe just the players mic'd up, or maybe like a combination of players mic'd up and people commenting, color commentary.
Not safe for work broadcast.
But I'll bet there will be a demand for that, because that's a way that they're going to be able to make up for lost gate revenue. If you can sell a subscription to 2 different types of a broadcast as opposed to just one, now you're looking at 2 revenue streams for the basketball product, where before it was just one. Now, how that would go with the TV deal, that's a whole other topic of discussion. But I think that the novelty and the kind of creativeness, I mean, it's been kind of cool to see how like the NBA concept has kind of gotten, I won't say like endorsed, but kind of rubber stamped by like medical professionals, economic professionals. Almost everybody's kind of like, this is a cool idea, right? Like, is it perfect? Of course not. But like, there's nothing perfect in society anyway. So let's not get all bent out of shape about that. But what I love about it is the potential of just coming up with different ways of seeing the game in a televised medium.
You got to believe that these guys have been running a lot of mock broadcasts just to see what it is with various groups, almost like they test election ideas and so forth. They've got to be really playing with that, because they did that thing in 2018 that was real dud, where they thought it'd be great to hear the ball bouncing and the sneakers squeaking and so forth. And everybody hated it, no music. So I'm sure that the networks are playing with this like you've never seen anything before, as trying to find that right formula. And I think in a sense that one of the reasons that the ratings had gone down last year, besides the China thing and everything, before we even ran into the pandemic, was that the NBA broadcasts has started to get a little jaded. They started to be repeated over and over, and the quality of the matchups, especially the ones that they had to decide ahead of time, when Zion got hurt and you're watching the Pelicans struggle, and there's a lot of things that just sort of became boring, and a lot of people were fast forwarding it. It reminded me back when people used to say, you only have to watch the last 2 minutes of the NBA game or the fourth quarter at best, And a lot of people were doing that, or they were, because of the availability of streaming and so forth and recording it, people were watching it late. I'd communicate with friends of mine and immediately tell me, don't say anything about the game. I got it on tape, I'm going to watch it tomorrow morning or later tonight.
Right.
So
to that I say you're going to miss the first 73 points if you don't watch full 48 minutes. And so You know,
it's just like the NBA All-Star game. It showed that you don't even need the first 3 quarters. All you need is that fourth quarter.
You didn't get to watch all 81. You didn't get to watch all 81. You only saw the last.
Some movies are like that too. So it's a new way of life.
No, I like
the new normal in the games. You're right, Jamie, is going to be fascinating.
There won't be any in-house music. There won't be any like dun, 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 or it will be weird if there is.
Well,
right?
maybe there will be. They're
But you still
supposedly
get
going to use the crowd noise from 2K, from NBA 2K.
Right, that actually might be a model. Right?
How's that going to look with empty stands? They're going to have maybe different different camera angles to try to make sure you're not looking at, you don't want it to look like Trump's Omaha, convention.
Well, either you're going to put like messaging on the stands of some sort, right? Like that was an idea I'd floated when the players in the NBA were going back and forth.
Cardboard cutout fans.
Totally. No, not cardboard cutouts. Like you could use the seating area as like a surface to which you could add like social messaging, or what you'll probably see is a lot of stats overlaid on the game, like kind of like a heads-up display console potentially, where you'll see a little bit more stat work up in the corners. I mean, it's going to be very interesting, right? Maybe you'll see 2 heads of like the broadcasters talking at you, like some sort of weird Wizard of Oz, like pay no attention to the game going on below you. Like, I don't know, right? It's going to be really weird.
How about giant big screens surrounding the entire arena, where you could put the crowds in via the giant screens?
That would be very much
part of the future of the league. If we don't have live people watching games.
Or what if you had a screen that would link to a person's Zoom so that they could be at the game in their seat, cheering from their seat, but it's just a
social distancing for the NBA.
No. I hope to be
driving Gerald crazy. I could tell.
No,
my gosh, Tom, you're at it again, my friend. You're at it again. Crazy Tom is at it again.
This is Raphael from NBA Draft Junkies.com. And you are listening to the Lakers Fast Break.
Hey everyone, it's Gerald from the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Just want to give you a heads up on what's coming up over the next couple weeks right here at the Lakers Fast Break podcast. A ton of great guests, so please, if you don't follow us yet or subscribe, please do so wherever you get your podcast, because there's a great lineup of guests I have coming along the way. Of course, we're going to have Raphael Barlow from the NBA Draft Junkies always on our show. Tom Wong from LakerHolics.net, also regular, and cannot thank both of them enough for being on our show. But we're going to have a lineup of guests for you. If you haven't seen already on our Facebook page, we've got a lot of great guests on the way. Check it out. NBA odds maker Rafael Esparza from Las Vegas. Got Melvin Washington III, also from Las Vegas. He's got a great show that happens every Friday on the Talk to Me Sports Radio Network on the Blog Talk Radio Network. Got Craig James coming up from the Final Score podcast on the Podcast City Network. Corey Harrison's also going to be on the show coming up from the Out of Bounds Sports podcast. Got Matt Moderno from the Believe in Wizards podcast. Eric Sklar from KFI AM 640 and the TSK Show podcast. He's scheduled to come on the show as well. Got Big Baby Jonathan Soffel from the Big Baby Jonathan Sports Podcast. You got to check out his awesome show. He's coming up on the program here, coming up in the very near future. Michael from the RTF Sports Network. Got to check out his awesome sports network that we are a part of each and every week right here at the Lakers Fast Break Podcast. Got to check out Michael's great stuff that he's doing there. Chris Jose LeBron, the Off the Ball podcast host. He's going to stop by the program. JB Ellis from the Program podcast. He's also going to come by, share his thoughts on the NBA scene. Cole Johnson from Cole Sports, Snowman Digital Media, and the Get Over Divorce programs. He's going to come by on the show. And Fago White Franklin III from Fox Sports 1340 AM Hopewell. He's going to come on and share his NBA thoughts as well. I'm looking forward to it. It's a great lineup of guests. I've recorded some already. I've got many more on the way. And of course, that doesn't even include our NBA mock draft that's also coming right here, number 2.0, with a ton of great draft insiders that's also coming up. All these great shows, you can check it out right here at the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Once again, I'm talking to Jamie Sweet and LakerTom from LakerHolics.net. Be part of the conversation today, because you see these guys, they've been conversating a lot, and they do the same thing on their site, Lakerholics.net, plus quite a few people as well also share their comments regularly. They share their posts, their thoughts, their feelings on the Lakers and the NBA. So you got to check it out today at Lakerholics.net. When it comes to the bubble itself, there's so many variables now. Like both you and Jamie mentioned it, and it's also been mentioned on my other podcasts. I've had so many recent podcasts, and I'm going to have so many more lined up with so many great guests. And we're all wondering, could there be a scenario where the coronavirus comes into play or some injuries come into play? Because there's just so many variables in play when it comes to the bubble. Are you guys concerned about the coronavirus still wreaking havoc upon the NBA season, or a major injury bug, let's say pulled hamstrings, groins, or anything else that could possibly happen because the players have been out so long? Jamie, I'll start with you.
Definitely. I think that the news recently that, there's doctors are finding that there's links to like cardiac issues after people have the coronavirus, and that being such a consistently high activity sport, I think, that's something that I'm sure that the medical teams and the team professionals and everybody that's associated with the NBA and the teams will be on the lookout for that. But, as a morbidly curious question, I feel like if somebody were to have a heart attack in a game, or like a heart attack as a result of, having had COVID at one point, testing positive, coming into the bubble, playing in the games, having an issue of some sort, I think that sort of thing might be enough to derail it. I think that a huge spike would be enough to derail it, or superstar players all getting it and missing games might be enough to derail it. Like if there's nobody worth watching, who's going to tune in to watch Sheik Lamb versus Villain? But nobody's going to check.
Well, I'll just say this, that you guys are familiar with Los Angeles sports like I am, and being raised for the first 25 years of my life in Southern California, I had a great love and appreciation for the Loyola Marymount Lions in their very short period of time when they were a national power and they were run and gun. It was really fun and exciting. And it was all led by Hank Gathers, the late Hank Gathers. And to see him collapse on the court like many people did, like I did, and see that happen was truly a tragic sign. And that's something that stopped the play right there. And, we stopped the conference tournament, and the Lions were still able to go to the NCAAs, but it was just so devastating for the team emotionally. And it gave them that inspiration to drive farther than maybe they could have without him. But still, if something like that happens in the NBA because of something related to COVID, let's say that happens to Braun or AD or a Philadelphia 76er or anybody.
If it happens to a Laker, they're not going to do anything. You know that. If it happens to somebody else, they might cancel the whole thing just to prevent the Lakers from winning.
It happens to a Celtic national holiday.
Yeah, well, I just think that it's going to, if that happens to anyone, there's going to be such a backlash that I think they would shut it down entirely. Tom?
Well, I think the injury thing is a serious concern, because these guys aren't going to be in regular basketball shape when the playoffs start.
Good point.
And LeBron's not going to lighten up. AD's not going to lighten up. Kawhi's not going to slow down. So you're going to have guys not in tip-top shape, and somebody's going to get injured. I think that's probably something that's going to happen. And there's going to be there's a percentage that you just have to expect is going to happen. Players getting tested positive, I'm not really so worried about that, even with the bubble outside, simply because, as I said earlier, the diminishing number of players that are going to be in the bubble as it moves along, it'd have to be something that happened early in the bubble in order to cause that. And when you look at the stats for these players, even during the end of the season when COVID was running through various teams, rosters, and so forth, there was never more than 2 or 3 players that were getting it. And generally, mostly players that were on the outskirts, although some of the players have had it. Now, I think Jamie brought a good point about especially the lung problems that some people are having as an aftermath of having COVID, and their wind and so forth. So the guys, a couple of stars have had it, and some of the players who've had it may have lingering aspects of the disease. And we may see, I know that Coach Vogel has talked about playing a lot of people. which is the total opposite of what everybody thinks about once you hit into the playoffs. It's narrow the rotation and and pulling up the minutes, and LeBron's going to play 40 and AD's going to play 40. They may look to be careful of that because of the conditioning, but
Tom and Gerald,
it's 90-10 that we get through it without anything tragic happening that derails it.
Jamie, I know you had something you wanted to interject in.
Well, I was just going to ask both of you, what kind of, load management was a big hot topic prior to the beginning of the season with Kawhi Leonard and, confined and all that stuff. Do you think we'll see some sort of, even though it's a very condensed season, even though there's not a lot of time to load manage, do you think we'll still see a lot of load management, do not play, or
as it gets
kind of how Frank did it, which was more like we'll play a lot of people all the time, almost like it's kind of preseason-y to keep minutes down without having to miss too many games, although AD missed, his share of games. LeBron missed, I think, 2 games, maybe 3.
Yeah. Well, I think
injuries are going to. I think the worry about injuries are going to make people not want to. Injuries happen when people are tired. Guys are tired. Everybody has proven that. So you just don't want your guys to get tired because that's when you pull a hamstring, tear an Achilles, and something like that. So I think that they're going to be and you're playing because you don't have the travel involved. You're going to play a closer, tighter schedule of games. Back-to-back and so forth, which you'd never have in the playoffs before. So I think there is going to be some load management. I'd love to see some load management, like the Clippers going home early and the Bucks going home early. That's the kind of load management I'm for. But we're not going to. I'm hoping that we do our typical load management that the Lakers have deployed, which is to blow people out so LeBron and AD can rest in the fourth quarter. Well, that's what I really want to see all the way through this.
If the Lakers clinch their conference, which they would only have to do really if they could realistically do if their first 2, 3, 4 games, like you said, then it makes it a lot easier to go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to cut down their minutes. We're going to they'll probably still want to play
a hard first quarter and a hard first half, and
then or AD you want to sit him out because he attracts those injuries, even though he says 100% healthy now. Right. He attracts those little injuries a lot.
He does.
We got to let new guys to see what they can do.
But I expect the Clippers to do it, especially if the Clippers decide. If the Clippers don't make the number 1 seed early on, I think that sets the future for the Clippers on. They won't care if they're number 2 or 3 because there is no home and away.
Well, they might just go load management then because they don't want it because they accomplished everything that they want to do in the seeding games, as they call them.
But that's what I'm saying.
No, the seeding game is going to be huge.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. If that first game the Lakers beat the Clippers, the Clippers are now 6.5 games with 7 games to play, which everybody would say is virtually impossible. And I would say at that point in time, Doc Rivers is going to go ahead into load management load for those two. I would, if I was on the Clippers, I would.
I think we'll see a lot of the Bucks, the Lakers, and the Clippers pouring it on the first half and then coasting the second half.
I wonder if Vogel will ramp people up slowly. If he's like first seed, second seed, don't care. I want to be healthy and into and going into the playoffs.
Because there's no home.
We're going to see a lot of guys who didn't play including Antetokounmpo and Kaycock. We're going to see them play too.
They might get a good 5 minutes a game in there. I don't know about see them play. They might
get some minutes too.
See some time.
It's going to be a weird. The seeding games are going to be weird.
I'm just going to tell you right now, guys, that I don't know if you'll see much of Antetokounmpo, at least that Antetokounmpo, or you will see much of Kaycock. You may see a little bit more Kaycock because he is playing at a higher level than Antetokounmpo.
And is more of a natural fit at the 5.
Yeah, exactly. But if the Lakers clinch early, you will see a lot more of Dion Waiters, Markieff Morris, and J.R. Smith. So I want to ask you guys this before we go into the discussion as far as who might come out on top, surprises, 8 seed, and all that on our back half hour. Before we head into that, I want to ask your thoughts on these 3 and which one of those guys needs to make the biggest impact. Jamie, I'll start with you.
I think that, honestly, the answers are probably more in-house, but of the 3, I would say probably Waiters has the opportunity to make the highest impact, even though Morris can play as a stretch 5. I think with having both JaVale and Dwight healthy, and on the roster, you'll see Frank stick probably a little more than Tom wants, a little less small ball, a little more traditional, not ignoring small ball. You'll still see 80 at the 5, but if you can do 80 at the 5, then why do you do Morris at the 5? Like if you're going to put out your best players, your most talented players, and JaVale and Dwight are far more talented on defense. Same goes for Caruso on defense over Waiters and J.R. Smith. And I think that's the identity the Lakers have worked on all year, more than their shooting or their scoring. The scoring and the shooting is kind of like LeBron, figure it out, AD, you're the release valve, and if somebody gets hot, feed the hot hand. It isn't really much else than that. There's some pet lob plays that you'll see. There's that elbow entry pass from the high post to the low post. There's the kind of elbow brush where the roll man either sticks or lets the shooter pop or rolls to the hoop, and they throw that all over the floor. But there isn't a lot of like Laker offense other than what's LeBron going to do.
And I go back to the fact that when the Lakers were replacing Troy Daniels, they brought two guys in that they looked at. One was J.R. Smith and the other was Dion Waiters. Right. And they decided Waiters was a better fit for what they needed at that point in time. And it was only until Avery decided that he needed to stay home with his boy that they actually went out and got JR. So, and the reasons are pretty simple as to why they chose Waiters over J.R. Smith. One, he's not just a fill-in for this year. He could be a valuable piece going forward. He's only 28. And he's very talented. JR's 34 and at the end of the road. Secondly, he's a playmaker. He can dish you 3 or 4 assists per game consistently, and we need a guy who can do that. And third, he can get his own shot. You know, he's a guy that when AD's not on the floor, LeBron's not on the floor, you can give him the ball, you can clear out the side, it's going to beat his man to the basket. He's a good three-point shooter. He's got some size. Now, all of this will be decided in the seeding games as to whether or not that can really come true. He and JR both haven't played a long time, so I think the easy favorite is going to be Morris, who has played well, even though he hasn't shot well. He's only taken 22 threes in 8 games. Morris is the sure guy to get the most minutes. The Waiters behind him, and JR, if he can get hot, give him the ball. And if he's not hot, he's sort of like the guy, if you make your first shot, you're going to have a good game. If you miss your first shot, pull him and put him on the bench.
Is there a world where Waiters could step into Bradley's starting spot in anyone's mind?
No, I think they stick with KCP straight through. KCP has played really, really well,
but better off the bench.
No, better as a starter.
I think he's
for him better as a starter, but I think for us better off the bench.
Although 17-3, you can't argue with as a starter.
I give great credit to KCP for. I used to think flexible. That same thing, Jamie, that he's that he failed when he was on the bench and he was good as a starter in previous seasons. But the way that he's reacted this year when he didn't start all the time and then he started to fill in and then Avery came back to the starting position, took that over as expected. But KCP actually played his best basketball the second half of the year there. And really the way he turned fans around to all of this KFC stuff that people were calling him and so forth. I don't have a doubt that he's the starter all the way through the playoffs.
Early on in the season, he was struggling, and a lot of people were perpetuating those bad vibes on him. But he has turned around, and I saw the stat on Spectrum Sportsnet yesterday that
he's the best three-point shooter on the team.
51% from the field, 43% from the three-point area, and 17-3 when he's a starter. So This could be a good move for the Lakers. Can he play that consistent defense? That's still up for debate, and that's against some of the players. To me, it's all about matchups. The Lakers are going to have an easier, hard time depending on the matchups. I mean, if they get Houston can give them fits because they go small. Plus, they have obviously the backcourt that could give Lakers some issues there. Obviously, I still think the Lakers would go through and win it, but I think I don't think it's going to be very easy. But there are other teams against Luka and Dallas, against Oklahoma City, even against Utah, which has one member, a key member, Bogdanovich, out already. he's gone for the season because he had surgery. That, to me, would be better matchups for the Lakers at this point in time. I think they would go ahead and have it a lot easier vantage point. And then if they're somehow, instead of the Clippers, get the Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals, or someone else or the Clippers, I think that would make it a lot easier for the Lakers. But then again, I think it's going to be like everybody else is saying. I think it's going to come down to a battle of L.A., whether we like it or not.
Probably. I think we have 2 defenders who can handle Giannis.
You have 3.
LeBron does a great job against him, and AD does a great job against him.
I also think JaVale McGee can give you 5 good minutes on him as well. That's what I was saying, because his size, and he's still athletic and quick enough. And I've seen him actually go out into the three-point area and cover guards at times and make it difficult for them. I think he can give Giannis a little bit of an issue as well.
Right. The only last thing I'd say about the matchups is, we've always had this attitude all year long. It doesn't really matter who starts. Frank will play the hot man. He's going to stay with a hot hand. And then if you do the job, and he's going to match up against the other team and try to force matchups that give us an advantage. I think that's a strength. All year long I hear this stuff about how the Clippers are so much deeper. They're deeper at the wing, but they don't have the centers or the guards that we have, the depth to do that. And we've got, if we can handle the guys on the wings against the Clippers the way that we have in the past, we're going to be in good stead. And I think we got enough depth that we'll see different lineups against the different matchups that we're facing in each of the playoff rounds.
One thing I want to ask you guys real quick, and I'll start again with you, Jamie, on this, is who do you think is going to sneak into that 8th playoff spot to most likely play the Lakers in the Western Conference?
I think Memphis is going to hold on to it. I think that Ja had hit a little bit of a rookie wall, and Zion kind of was able to come in fresh. And really, and for as much as the Pelicans struggled early, Brandon Ingram really kind of established himself and kept that team at maybe not, I won't say above water, but just below the surface of the water, like kind of get above. And then when Zion came back, that was like that big push. And very much unheralded, when Drew Holiday got healthy, those are the 2 things that got that team kind of fired from a cannon mid-season, which is really what you want as a team going into the playoffs, kind of galloping as opposed to scratching and clawing, as it felt like Memphis was going to have to do. That they just played a huge season. Expectations they probably weren't expecting start to filter into their locker room, into their vibe, and this break I think is going to allow them to kind of, and the fact that they're going to be a little more isolated. I think that the Grizzlies are going to be able to hold on to that spot, but it'll be close. If I had to pick a team other than them, it would have to be the Pelicans. But I think it's going to be. I think the Grizzlies are going to fight off all comers, even though their schedule's a little tougher.
Tom?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the 2 factors are that really are going to make a difference in my mind are, number one, they have a 3.5 game lead, and they're only going to play 8 games, man. So.
But you only have to be within 4.
Yeah, that's true. But then they'll have 2. They'll only have to win 1 against the other team having to win 2. Second thing is, I think Ja Morant is going to play like he wants to cinch the Rookie of the Year award. He doesn't want any questions. He doesn't want any questions about Zion steaming up there in the last 8 games and stealing that award from him. And the media has done everything they can. In fact, there's a big argument that the only reason we got 22 games in this playoff situation is just so that they get a chance for Zion Williamson to play in the playoffs. So I'm going with Memphis too.
I'm going to say this: never count out Portland. Portland's
No,
healthy. They've got 2 big. Well, Portland's not 100% healthy. I mean, because Rodney Hood's still out, and he's out with Achilles. But they've got their 2 big guys back.
Yep.
And Portland is
2 good big guys.
And Portland is very motivated at this point in time. And Damian Lillard, you've seen what he did against the Lakers earlier this season. I'm never going to
make it. We'll sweep them.
Well, he'll score 50 on us while they're doing it too.
Dude, he murders us.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you what, right now, it's just so much great conversation so far. Once again, I'm talking to Jamie Sweet and LakerTom from Lakerholics.net. Be part of the conversation today at Lakerholics.net. One thing I want to ask you guys when it comes to a successful Lakers run, who needs to be the X factor? Tom, I want to ask you first, who do you think needs to be that X factor? I know you've written it before on medium.com and your great columns there that you also transcribe to Lakerholics.net, but if there's one individual that you think needs to be X factor, should it be?
Well, it's really tough because we have so many players that need to step up, and most likely we're going to see, if we're successful and we win a championship, I think we're going to see a repeat of what it's been during the regular season, which is that it's not one guy. It's this guy for this series. It's another guy for that series. It's another guy when we get into the finals and the Western Conference and so forth. But if I had to pick a player who I think could be the one player that if he really breaks out, we're going to win the championship, I think it's got to be Kyle Kuzma. I think he's so underrated. He's been injured most of the year, and he's 100% healthy now. He's adjusted his jump shot so that he's, instead of having that hitch where he goes up and then shoots, he's doing it in one motion now.
His defense has vastly improved this season.
His dating habits and his social media stuff and so forth. But if he's healthy and can go in there, and the way he finished the season, I really liked, because he had, in those two big games against the Clippers and the Bucks, he almost pulled off a double-double. He averaged 9 points and 9 rebounds. He didn't shoot well from deep, but that's the key with him. If he can hit those long shots and hit his 3-point average up to 36% for the seeding games in the playoffs, the Lakers will win.
And he's been playing much better defense this year.
Yep.
We thought he was a joke defensively, I'm going to be honest with you, like a sieve where people just walking by him and scoring left to right. Well, I like the fact that Vogel has given him challenges, like putting him on Westbrook, putting him on certain players that would be an issue. And they still score, but now a lot of times they're having a harder time to score. They're having a harder time. They're missing shots. And a lot of that is due to the hard defense that Kyle Kuzma is now playing and now showing people he can play, because he needs to in order to stay on the court, because as you've seen, as his defense is now rising, his offense just really hasn't come to fruition yet. But I think he is also the X factor because he can provide something different that not a lot of the other Lakers that play regularly can provide, that we've seen already. And you're right, Tom. If he can find some consistency like he did when he was first around on the Lakers, playing in that Summer League team in that first year with the Lakers, I'm hoping he can recapture that, because if he can, the Lakers really should have a lot easier time on their hands. Jamie, who would be your X factor?
Instantly have to agree with Kyle Kuzma. My runner-up, I think, would actually be Frank Vogel. If he can get the matchup game right without his starting point guard, who led was like the focal point of his defensive attack, along with incorporating 3 pretty reputation-wise boneheaded NBA players, on top of playing in the bubble, on top of being the Lakers, on top of what's happened to the Laker franchise this whole year, from being in China when China hit to Kobe's helicopter, Kobe and Gigi going down, all of it. Like, that's like, if that's not like Coach of the Year, I don't, you got to get rid of the award. Like,
he doesn't get the respect he deserves, that's for sure.
He's not going to win it, unfortunately, because he does, like you said, he doesn't get the respect. Right now, Nick Nurse is probably the leading candidate because of how he's taken the team, how the record they have without Kawhi. So a lot of people are really in his boat, and he's done a great job, no doubt. Yeah. But Frank Vogel, like you said, steering this team with all these different personalities, that, as you've noted, Tom, on the show before, have worn out their welcome in other places. To me, I think that how he's brought it together, I think he doesn't get enough credit for it, and he does deserve an opportunity to become Coach of the Year, but I don't think that'll happen.
There's another unsung hero here, which is our ball boy. Rob Pelinka, our ball boy. Because he's the guy who's really made some great moves and brought in people. He's created an atmosphere where there is a consensus building all the time, where the coach, the superstars, and the front office are all on the right page. It's why you can bring in a Dion Waiters, a Dwight Howard, and a J.R. Smith And nobody's really worried that they're going to be anything other than they may not perform the way that we want them to perform, but nobody's worried about them destroying the chemistry of the team or ruining the camaraderie that we've got going. And then the final thing comes down to, if you're going to go into, Jamie's made a great point about this being an unprecedented challenge. Whoever wins this championship gets a gold star, not an asterisk. They get a gold star for having done it against odds that are much more insurmountable than any other season. To have a 3.5 month layoff, come in there, play it in a bubble in the middle of a pandemic without home court advantage, So it's going to be LeBron and AD, one of the big advantages that we have over everybody else, because both of those guys are hungry. And this is the season when they're going to prove it. Bron's going to prove he's still the GOAT of this era, and AD is going to prove that he's going to be considered to be the GOAT going forward, and the Lakers are going to leave the Celtics in the rearview mirror.
Now look at you, LakerTom, with quoting Doc Rivers, the gold star issue. But you're right. When it comes to going all the way, I think all three of us can say in unison that we're thinking that the Lakers are going to do it. We're signaling the ref for a quick timeout, but we'll be back with more of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
That is by far my favorite, because it's also character-driven and the stakes are high and there's much more of a mystery and intrigue to it.
A game like Wolfenstein, which people are saying are one of the most socially important video games of the past 10 years.
Catch our shows on radio worldwide 7 days a week, or at any time on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on over 30 more podcast outlets. Before we go ahead and plug your stuff, guys, on the Lakerholics.net site, and also we close out the show, I want to go ahead and hear your thoughts on who they might match up against. I'm still thinking it's going to be Milwaukee, although I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. I also think that I wouldn't be surprised if another team comes out of there. But Jamie, I want to hear your thoughts on who the Lakers will match up. I know they're going to eventually defeat whoever they're going to match up against. I think that's what all of us are predicting. But
I don't like to make. I like to one game at a time, man. One game at a time, Gerald.
Okay.
One game at a time. Tom likes to project far into the future, like
1 year at a time, 5 years at a time.
Timeline that doesn't exist. Although I have to say here and now, I didn't believe we would trade for 80 when we did. I made a gentleman's bet with LakerTom, which he won because I was wrong. So I can admit it. I'm a man enough to know when I was mistaken. I actually, to be absolutely honest, if Philly is healthy, like truly healthy and stays healthy all the way, I think Philadelphia has as good a chance of coming out of the East as anyone. I think there's nobody that can contend with Embiid, and if they can, if they can stay healthy, all of them, the whole team, then I think they've got a great shot.
They need to get their shooting. They don't have as much shooting as they did last year, so they need some type of shooting. Tobias Harris needs to perform at a level that's better than what he's done so far this season. But they do have a defensive wall. They're the only team that outside of the Lakers can throw continuous 1, 2, 3 big bodies at Giannis. They're the only other team I really think that can do that outside of the Lakers.
I think the Raptors are a problem for them in the East. I think Boston's a weird team this year. Like, they've overperformed, but overperforming in the regular season doesn't necessarily, to me, equate to playoff success.
Tatum has to play at that level. He has to play at that level.
Oh, the whole from for 3 months, like no drop-offs. Like, if he has a 14.6 rebound game, that's a loss. Like, especially in the playoffs. Like, that won't fly. So
he's going to get there, but maybe not yet.
They're losing Horford was huge. Like, I could see Howard ending up in Boston, actually, Dwight ending up in Boston, because they're going to look out and see that there's, as much as, Houston wants to say, like, small ball forever, like, the league doesn't work like that. There's still guys who are 7 feet, who've got skills, who you have to contend with under the hoop. Are there as many as there were 15, 20 years ago? Certainly not. Do they also have the ability to shoot from the outside? Some do. But at the end of the day, if you can score a basket from 5 feet or closer through a few passes and a nifty move, that's what's going to work in the playoffs more often than hopefully these three guys who shot the equivalent of 40% over the course of the regular season shoot 40% over the course of the playoffs or a 7-game series. And those are all very different equations that don't always bear out the way the storylines kind of hope they do.
Tom, did you have any thoughts on who might come out of the East?
I think it's going to be the Bucks, primarily because they're such a good defensive team. When you put Bledsoe in there and you've got Giannis, you've got a great defensive team. They don't have as much shooting as they really need to surround Giannis, but there aren't many teams that have guys who can cover the guy and keep him from getting to the rim. The Lakers really probably have the two best Giannis stoppers in the league, in LeBron and AD. So I think that's going to be Milwaukee out of there. I think if we lose to anybody, it's probably the Clippers. I think that they're by far the second best team in the league, in my opinion, and the Bucks are really the third best team in the league.
There you go. There you have it. Jamie, you don't seem too confident on that.
I think the Bucks have the same problem that the Raptors are going to have. If they, or that the Celtics will have, is that if they encounter an elite, like if they well, depending on how Jokic plays, but like if they, because it looks like the Clippers, I don't know, the seeding game has to kind of got to go through the seeding game first and see who's matching up against who, because it's still a little too wide open to say like this team's going to match up with that team or we'll face that team before they face us.
It's a real model there. Everybody's got 40 or 41 wins in the middle. They can switch around
exactly
from 3 to 7 easily.
Right. These short games are still going to determine a lot. So that in and of itself is going to be exciting. But I think dominant centers, although are not in fad, are still an unstoppable force. More so in the playoffs than in the regular season because there's more time between games. There's the defense that is coming at you.
Less transition.
More and more confidence. So, I feel like but having said that, if George and Leonard are hot from the outside, it's kind of game over and Lou Williams, if those three guys are hitting it, then, your big center is going to have a lot of points to overcome because they're just going to be raining fire on you from all sides. And that's a difficult thing to stop as well. So it's going to be interesting. I see the Clippers as probably being, like many of the old Laker battles of the past, the true NBA finals might happen in the Western Conference Finals.
Yep. Yeah, I was disappointed that they didn't decide to seed the teams 1 to 16 while they were in the bubble because you don't have the travel issues that have always prevented them from doing that in the past.
I like that.
Of course, that would have meant an advantage to the Lakers, so there's no way that the league would have approved that.
Well, there are variables, like you said, that either which way benefit and detract from what the Lakers are going to be doing. But overall, I think that the Lakers with AD and LeBron, just too hard of a matchup for any other team to deal with. I think that as long as they stay healthy and they stay productive and motivated, like LeBron is.
Motivation is his middle name.
That is true. That is true. Once again, I'm talking to Jamie Sweet and also LakerTom from LakerHolics.net. But before we head on out, guys, we have just a few minutes left. So I want to hear from you guys what you're working on at LakerHolics.net. LakerTom, I'll start it with you, my friend. I know you got always something on the back burner when it comes to LakerHolics.net and your Medium.com web pages and your stories there and your articles that you have there. So tell me what's going on with you at LakerHolics.
Well, I think the topic that's really caught my interest right now, and I'm probably not even going to write about it simply because I never get the results when I write about subjects involving financing and the future of the league and the bubble and stuff like that I do when I put up a trade request or a story about a particular player and so forth. There was a great article that came out today by Brian Windhorst and Tim Botamps about the challenges facing the league moving forward. October 18th is supposed to be free agency start. So by the end of September, they have to resolve two major issues. The first being, how are players going to get played? What's the salary cap going to be? And you got teams like the Golden State Warriors that are looking at $140 million salaries, and they benefited from a $25 million jump in the salary a couple of years ago to be able to get to keep that lineup together and add Kevin Durant. And now almost everybody is going to say that they're going to smooth out the salary cap over the next 3 years. to hide the effects and impacts of the financial chaos caused by coronavirus, which is going to, again, give the Warriors another big break. So anyway, there's a big challenge there. There's a big challenge there in figuring out exactly what we're going to do between the players and the owners. You got $8.4 million to $1 billion in revenue, and you're going to lose 3.5 of that. It's going to leave you with $5 billion in revenue. The players are supposed to get half, $2.5 million. There are $4 million in guaranteed contracts next year. So that's going to be quite a challenge to figure out what to do. Then the next challenge you have right after that is profit sharing. The big market teams, all of a sudden, that are all contributing all this money from all of their sales and stands, the Lakers, the Celtics, and all of the teams that are contributing to the salary, to the profit sharing, aren't going to have that profits to share. And you may see some teams like Charlotte being able to actually put fans in the stand. Some of the small market teams that aren't in the same situation maybe that California is and Chicago is and so forth. So it's going to throw this whole thing topsy-turvy, and what we're going to see there is some owners who might be able to have less loss by not having a season than by actually playing through the season. So there's a lot of questions to be answered. Can the league continue to be the league that leads in having players and owners working together in the same direction, or are they going to turn into the Major League Baseball where these guys are almost ready to have a fist fight when they have a players-owners meeting, It's going to be a real challenge, and it'll be, Adam Silver can really cement his position as one of the greatest commissioners of professional sports team and how he works this out. Same with Michelle Roberts, who is the attorney that represents the Players Association. You've got two very smart executives in charge of the two sides that are going to be making these decisions. And I think it's something that every player and every NBA fan is going to have to keep a close eye on it, because we're talking about the future of the sport that we all love.
Jamie, what are you working on? Or did you have something you wanted to go ahead? I noticed during our conversation there, what LakerTom was saying, you had some
well, I mean, I think there will be some sort of season next year. And to the idea that there will be fans in the stadium, I was just kind of thinking, I wonder if they put like you get your seat, but they have the hockey plexiglass up around the basketball court, so that there's
or around your seat maybe.
Huh?
Mini bubbles. Everybody has their own bubble.
That's way too.
Yeah, mini bubbles. We're all going to be like, wait.
I would say the hockey deal would be more effective.
Or you could sell a third of the seats probably and have social distancing.
Whatever it looks like, I could see, like the Orlando, the Miamis, the Charlottes, the Hawks, probably letting fans into the arena for the season next year. And the Golden State Warriors, for their incredible new arena, I bet it will be empty for all of whatever the season looks like. Same with the Staples Center. And Sacramento's probably always half empty, so it'll be like always.
That's an advantage. That some teams have an advantage because they're used to playing in empty stadiums.
Right. So everybody's got to be empty. So it's even playing field for once. No, I can't.
I what it's like to play in Sacramento.
That's the greatest organization beyond high esteem. No, but I think that there will be I think that what we've seen during the ramp up to the bubble is unprecedented agreement between a players' union and ownership, with the NBA kind of finding staking out a very neutral middle ground. And I think that's one of the great things about Adam Silver that Rob Manfred hasn't learned yet, which is to cow to one side or the other is not the designation of your job. You need to bring the two sides together.
You need a win-win situation.
Well, or so that it happens in a way that feels organic, as opposed to what baseball has become, which is basically come back to work, season starting. It doesn't have an organic feel. And even though there's been issues raised, and they're valid issues, and even though there are multiple concerns, and they're all valid concerns, I should say, I still think the way the NBA has gone about it is the best possible way that could be, given the circumstances of our reality.
Well said. I agree.
For the cap, I can't tell you. I think it's going to depend on how the playoffs do. If all of basketball is the most watched it's ever been because planet Earth is so bored, that could be something that starts to. I mean, nothing's going to make up the $4 billion that we're going to lose from the China, from the stoppage and play. It's not the lack of gate revenue that gap will not be closed. But if it can be shrunk to a point where they can envision a way going forward that they can approximate or come close to a way to build off of that in the hopes that within a year or so there's a vaccine, or within several years there's the planet has adjusted to the COVID virus in a natural way. However that process unfolds on that front, I think that these playoffs and this little shortened season is going to really kind of inform the NBA on what it's going to look like going forward. And is that the Lakers play at Staples Center, or is there like a West Coast, East Coast series of hubs or bubbles that the players play in that are more controlled than an arena? But I don't know. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting because the travel aspect is, I think, the part that everybody's most wants to avoid the most, because flying in a plane is a very good way for it, should somebody have it, for it to spread. So I think that's sort of those are the factors that I think are going to inform us a lot. And I think that the Players Union is going to probably insist on the 50-50 BRI split, but will be more willing to talk about things like putting salaries in an escrow or increasing the size of the escrow so that the payments can unfold in a more organized manner. I hope that they don't do the cap smoothing, because not just because it benefits the Warriors, but I feel like it kind of torpedoes a lot of the small market teams too, because they're forced to run a business without, as you mentioned earlier, Gerald, frivolous expenses, right? Like they have to watch their bottom line more than like the Lakers or even the Knicks, who haven't had a successful team in a decade, and they throw the team out there. Woo! They don't. There's no concern, it seems like, for the bottom line in the Knicks franchise because it's the Knicks. But the Charlotte Hornets can function like that. So I kind of hope the cap smoothing idea doesn't go through, because it punishes the people who ran their business the best.
In the long run, what's going to save the NBA is the equity that they've got in the valuation of the teams. That's what will allow the league to put together a financial program to help the teams that don't have the revenue, to bridge the gap so that they can keep paying the players what they're going to be, knowing that they're going to get this money back, knowing that they have the equity in the valuation of the teams, that they can bet and play the long game. That's something that the League Players Association and the owners have always done, and I think that's going to be the solution in some way. I think there is going to be cap smoothing, probably for 3 years, And I wish it wouldn't happen. And in a ways, it's probably okay for the Lakers too, because it still keeps alive that hope that that LeBron will take less than a max, and we'll have money to offer Giannis to join us, or to go out in my opinion, get a third guard. We need a guard as the third superstar, as opposed to another
LeBron
forward.
Ain't taking less than that. LeBron's not taking that.
I'll take Giannis.
He goes into a hyperbolic chamber to sleep. He's not taking that.
Well, if you want to hear great conversations like these, actually, if you
He
want
did
to
in Miami.
Well, if you want to
Not
read,
much less, but a little less.
Let Gerald finish. Let Gerald plug his thing.
well, if you want to read great conversations like these, the back and forth that Jamie and LakerTom have like this in a written form each and every day, along with so many other great individuals that are there, you can just check out what I'm showing off today on our Facebook live feed at Lakerholics.net. Be part of the conversation today. You see it right here, right on the screen if you're watching Lakerholics.net. They're great articles, great information. They always try to keep it family friendly. They always try to keep it within perspective. They respect everybody's opinion that's there. And if you're a Lakers fan, there's no better place to go than Lakerholics.net. Well, guys, Jamie Sweet, LakerTom, it's been great having you on the program again. I want to do this again as we go forward, as we continue. I know, LakerTom, I'm going to see you, but Jamie, you're most welcome back at any point in time you can make it, with or without LakerTom, especially when he goes on these, crazy trades. Especially when he goes on these crazy trades. It's not like you said, Jamie.
Somebody needs to give Tom a trade machine for Christmas so he can just go into another room and just let it run, and it'll be like Gomez Adams with the ticker tape coming out. This trade was successful.
I can't wait for the results of the seeding games in the playoffs, so that I'll have all this fresh ammunition to generate ideas about who to trade and who to trade for.
I like your Oladipo idea the best. Oladipo, I think,
The Oladipo idea is something that is feasible because of the injury situation and the fact
but not with Caruso. First rounder, no Caruso. Caruso's got to stay. He's the next Avery Bradley, but different.
Well, that is definitely something right
Caruso
there.
Is one of the guys. It's one of the few guys in the league who can be both underrated and overrated.
When you read this conversation at Lakerholics.net, Crazy Tom, and like I told you before, Jamie Sweet, the glass is with Tom always half full.
More than half.
Way more than half full. It's a cup that is never overfloweth.
Yes, overflowing with positivity and optimism. That's indeed. Right. Once again,
which I appreciate.
That's what if you're a Laker fan, that's what you got to be used to. It's been a little bit of a drought the last six years. We're starting to turn things around right now.
Yes, we are. And hopefully we are going to go ahead and start our way into a great playoff run and a championship for the Lakers. It all starts right here in the bubble. We're looking forward to it. Jamie Sweet, I'm going to have you back on the show, hopefully real soon, whenever you're able to make it back on. Laker Tom, I know you're coming back here always. From Lakerholics.net, the guys right here, we truly appreciate it. Once again, for us, 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you have any questions, at Lakers Fast Break, at LakerTom, LakersFastBreak@yahoo.com. Jamie, any way to get a hold of you?
Just find me on the blog. That's the best way.
Guys, it's been great having you a part, once again, of the Lakers Fast Break podcast.
Thank you, Gerald.